All right. Well, it's 10 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. First of all, thank you all for showing up and joining us today as we talk about QuickBooks and the online and desktop environment. Did want to just go over a couple housekeeping items in using Zoom and talk about our different speakers that are going to be here today. So welcome again. Thank you all for coming. We do have two types of chat boxes in Zoom. We have a chat box, which we typically use for technical issues. If you're having any issues hearing people or any other tech issues, please go ahead and put them in the chat box so we can respond. And then if you have any questions throughout our chat today, please go ahead and use the Q&A box to enter any questions. From there, you can view any questions that other people have asked and also thumbs them up if you have the same question. So it helps us reduce any duplications that we might have. So you can find both of those at the bottom of your Zoom window, or if you're in full screen mode, it should just be at the bottom of your screen altogether. I think we have a quick update on episodes 1 and 2. They have been posted on our website, and I believe the slide decks have been posted as well. We'd expect episode 3, this episode, to be posted probably next week is my guess, maybe at the very earliest, the end of this week. But we do send out a newsletter blast when those episodes get posted. Brenda, you want to go on to the next page? So these are our speakers today. We have Brenda and myself, Erin. We've been hosting the episodes so far and we'll continue to do so. And then we have Alana from our Kalispell office. She's a senior accountant with JCCS. And we have Tracy Gallo. I may have said your last name wrong since it's new. And she's a CPA out of our Helena office and is a tax manager with the firm and has also worked for, I believe, the Montana Department of Revenue or another taxing authority in the past. So hoping to get some really good information from her. And we'll talk about some tax implications towards the end. Disclaimers, the same as always. We try to keep everything as accurate as possible. If you have any specific questions about your situation, please talk to your tax advisor or accountant in the firm. We are available for any questions that you might have. Now, in episode 1, we discussed data, good data, bad data, how to identify your data, why it's important. And then last episode, we talked about a tech stack, what it means, why it's important to have a tech stack, how you even begin that conversation. And now it's time for us to start digging into the actual tech stack tools themselves. And the first one, the biggest one, is of course QuickBooks. QuickBooks is probably I would say holds the largest market share of accounting products in the US, probably the world at this point. I know there's some others that have pretty good market shares as well, but if we're talking about small businesses, Intuit and QuickBooks definitely is the biggest name out there. We'll talk about QuickBooks in this episode, and then in our further episodes, we'll talk about other solutions that meet specific needs like payroll, bill payments, receivables, all of that stuff. So we'll talk about the other tech stack solutions in episodes 4 and 5, but we're definitely going to be focusing on Intuit here. We're going to be discussing the online product and the desktop product, how they differ, when is it the right way which is the right product to choose? Is there one that's better than the other? Which is not necessarily, it all depends upon your situation. But we'll talk about how to identify those issues that may cause some problems in the future. So for today, we're focusing on QuickBooks and how it integrates with or how we look at integrating into the other systems. But Brenda, you want to get us started?
Sure. So chances are that if you've had anything to do with managing finances for a business or worked on finances of your own business, you've at least heard of QuickBooks. And I'm guessing that most of the people on today's webinar have spent some time working in the software. The majority of the businesses that we work with at JCCS manage their accounting records in QuickBooks. QuickBooks has seen a lot of transformation over the years. They started with the traditional QuickBooks Desktop version. They then expanded out to the enterprise solution, and now more and more businesses are using the online version. I'm excited to have Alana with us today. She works with a lot of clients in the QuickBooks space. She's a great resource for our clients. And so I've got a couple of questions for you, Alana. With so many options of QuickBooks out there, how do you know what is best for your company? Should you be going with the online or the desktop version?
I think when you're deciding between QuickBooks Desktop and QBO, it's important to realize how the data gets into the general ledger system. So with QBO, it really starts with a reviewer approach where the information is downloaded through online banking. It flows in through different OCR applications that connect with QBO. So the data populates into the general ledger, and then you're really taking that review step in coding your transactions, make sure all the data is in your transactions. Where with QuickBooks Desktop, it is more of a data entry approach where you're recording the transactions into the bank register, you're booking your bills, creating journal entries, and then you are having to take that step to then review your information. So it really starts with how is your data getting in and what is your first step between the reviewer versus data entry.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It really is about the different approaches to your processes. Yeah. So what about the differences between the cloud-based versus a locally installed QuickBooks?
So with QuickBooks Online, it is cloud-based. You can share the file between users, either within your company or with external users. So a lot of our clients, we have access to their files, so we're able just to jump in, look at the files, they can continue working on it. With QuickBooks Desktop, you have that file sharing back and forth. So a lot of times that does mean if they send a file to us, we're either working in a file for QuickBooks Desktop and either have to get them the changes or they stop working for the time being. One thing to note too, especially with all this COVID stuff that has been going on, we've seen a lot of flexibility with QuickBooks Online for our clients, where maybe their accountant has to work from home or one of the owners has to work from home. With QuickBooks Online, the accounting process just kind of keeps rolling forward because you're able to access the file as long as you have an internet connection. I've also seen with other clients where if they're in QuickBooks Desktop, they've had to start and stop the file and kind of pass it around. The accountants will take it home, work on it, send it to the owner. They're able to look at it, and then another file has to be sent back to their internal bookkeeper.
Yeah, and I know that you've seen this before too. It really seems like when you're transferring that file around like that, it just opens the door for duplication, the wrong file getting used, corrupt files. I know that's one factor where we really push to use the online. It just streamlines that process.
Definitely. And I was going to say, if you are using QuickBooks Desktop, one little tip, if you are transferring files back and forth, changing the file name definitely helps to like the last backup of like today, 1020, instead of keeping that file name, it starts to get really confusing. If we're passing around a file that's dated, I've seen some dated for 2018, and it does get confusing which file is the most current. So if you are using desktop, a little tip is just change that file name so that you know which file you're in.
That's a really good tip. I'm glad that you brought that up. Now, we do have some clients who QuickBooks Desktop is the best fit, and we'll talk about that a little bit further. But if that is the case, can you talk a little bit about how you can host that in the cloud so you can still have that ease of access with the desktop version?
Yeah, so there are some systems that do allow for the fully hosted QuickBooks files or for the file transfers of QuickBooks Desktop files. So there's quite a few out there. Right Networks is the fully hosted where you can have the QuickBooks Desktop. To transfer files for the data transfers, you can use something called QBox or RAS. So there are quite a few different options out there for moving that desktop file back and forth or for allowing that hosted desktop file to be used.
Yeah, we've seen some good success with our clients who have remained in the desktop version using either the fully hosted or that transfer tool. It just eliminates some of that back and forth that we run into. Yeah. So naturally, when we move things into the cloud, we get the question, how safe is my data? And who else is going to have access to my data? So could you expand a little bit about that?
Yeah, and this is definitely a fair question of how safe is my data, especially when you're with QuickBooks Online, you're connecting to a lot of different apps, you're connecting to a lot of different banking systems. So the first thing is QuickBooks Online, in order to connect to those financial institutions, they have the same security as your online banking for your checking or savings account, and the online banking for your credit card. So there is that first level of security that QuickBooks has to maintain to be able to connect with the financial institutions. As far as who has access to your data, you have control over who you're inviting into your QuickBooks file, which is really nice. And you can manage your users. One thing to consider with QuickBooks Online, we've seen that internal bookkeepers or even external accountants are invited into a QuickBooks file. And when you stop working with an outside accountant or you go through some turnover internally, you do want to make sure you're making those users inactive and then adding in your new user. That just provides a good security so that you don't have inactive employees still having access to your file. And you can see who you've invited and who has access to your file through the users. But just when you are done with an accountant or have turnover, definitely go in and make those users inactive.
Yeah, definitely. And coming from my point of view, it's been really nice with the clients that have gone to QuickBooks Online. Maybe they're working with an outside bookkeeper before they come to us. And so traditionally with the desktop version, they would have to get that file back from them, get the backup back from the bookkeeper before they can start using it. There's no guarantee that that bookkeeper has, gotten rid of their file. They may always have access to it on their computer. In the online version, it's so nice to just be able to go in and inactivate those people and instantly cut them off from your file. So whereas a lot of times I know we look at this as kind of a area that may be troublesome, I look at it as a positive, that it allows you to have more access on who can get into your books. Yeah. So next, we're going to talk a little bit more about the online version. Erin, you want to go ahead and jump in?
Definitely. So, got to get my video up here. For us, for JCCS, QBO is our preferred general ledger system. That's QuickBooks Online. Because there is a variety of plug and play applications for payroll, bill pay, inventory, many different point of sale systems plug directly into QBO. With QuickBooks Desktop, you usually have to use the file importer that'll bring in the information. You have a harder time seeing actually how everything's talking to each other. So it is easier for us to see what's actually happening with the integrations when we use QBO. Also, you can access the file from anywhere with an internet connection. They have an application that you can download from the Play Store if you're on Android, or Apple Store. You can download it as well. So really, the access points for QuickBooks Online are vastly improved upon the desktop version. There is also the added automation. I would say Intuit right now is really focused on getting as much automation as they can in there so that accountants and small business owners can spend less time dealing with the data categorization and more time looking at the information. We don't want to spend all that time just typing in everything or keying in bills or just entering stuff into a check register, because it just doesn't give us the time that we really need to see how a business is doing. Is there anything we can do differently? looking at the business as a whole, where we wouldn't necessarily have time to do that in the past because we were too busy doing data entry. So I think the solutions for some automation there are definitely a bit better, a bit more built out in the QBO solution. Also, for me, I consider the absolute best feature of QuickBooks Online to be the collaboration level. The fact that you as the client or the small business owner can be in the file at the same time as the accountant and looking at the exact same screen without having to send a QuickBooks file back and forth to try to get the information. That's huge to me. That means that we can both be looking at the same thing. We can figure out what the issue is if there's an issue, or we can just be reviewing the same information together. It really helps the conversations move along. We can do it at a much quicker pace. There's not the file transfer time and then finding time to review everything. We can just hop right in, get in there, dig into the information. We're all looking at the same stuff, so there's no lag or difference in information there. That helping with issues, I can't even count the number of times that a client has called, and because I've been able to get in and look exactly at it, I can help them right away. And then they know going forward, they can call, we can answer the question, we can look at everything the same way, and they can follow those same steps in the future. They can go back and look at exactly what we did. They can follow the audit log, which you can do in desktop, but again, you've got that file transfer aspect. So that level of collaboration by far for me is the best feature of QBO. Then it also helps with tax prep. So when it comes time to start talking to your tax CPA, you can just let them know, hey, we've got the books done through September. Let's set up a meeting to talk about the tax prep, and they can hop in and start looking at stuff. They can look at what your budgets are if you're using the budget module. They can go in and they can actually drill down right into the account level. So they can see all the transactions in there and really do some digging without having to do that file transfer and trying to find the time to download the file, restore it, hope that there's nothing wrong with the restoration, that everything goes fine, and then get into it. Or just being sent a profit and loss and balance sheet, they don't get to drill down into that data. So having QuickBooks Online access really helps everyone in the end. The other features that are great are the bank feeds. You can set up rules for coding where it does some automatic stuff if you want, or some level of review. You can do some quicker reconciliations because there's an auto reconciliation feature with the bank feed transactions. It can cut some pretty significant time down on the bank rec function. So you can really spend more time evaluating the actual transactions and what they mean. Finally, I would say, well, actually not finally, I have two. The receipt capture, which is in a beta form in QBO right now, is pretty decent. Still needs a little bit of work, and Intuit's working on it. That's why it's still in beta. But it allows you to capture your receipts and your hopefully bills soon and actually attach them to transactions in QBO. And this is where we use another app. As if you attended our last episode, we had John from Receipt Bank attend and give us some of his thoughts on why we should be using a data collection tool to help get the information into QuickBooks. So having the ability to attach those transactions right there into QBO, have all of the support documentation, can really be great for just document storage in general. And then also for anyone needing to review something in the future, they can go back, click on that transaction, click on the attachment, and there's the invoice or the receipt right there. So really gives them a lot of backup. Any questions on the best feature or anything that you guys wanted to add? Brenda, Alana, Tracy?
I would agree. I think between the bank feeds and the automatic reconciliation, the time savings is amazing. It really allows not only us, but your internal staff or yourself to focus on the bigger picture. And you're not spending so much time on that day-to-day input.
Mhm. So there are all these great things about QBO. We prefer it. It can do a lot, but there are some limitations in moving to a cloud-based system. It's not always the right fit. I would encourage everyone to still look at the QBO solution and see if it is. It's a good question to ask. And don't let fear of change be the reason you don't use it, because there are so many benefits from it. However, like I said, QBO isn't the ideal choice for everyone. If a business doesn't have a reliable high-speed internet connection, a hosting solution or QBO probably not going to be the best bet for them. A file transfer solution like QBox or RAS would probably be a decent idea because it can connect sometimes and transfer files that way. But if there's not reliable internet, QBO just isn't the right fit. We've tried to get it to work with places that are have a less reliable internet, and it just ends up not being a great solution. So that would be your main reason why QBO isn't the right fit. The next one that I see is that there's a very special need that QBO can't fulfill. My first step when we run into that is, okay, so QBO doesn't have this feature. Is there a third-party app that could fulfill this feature that would integrate in? If so, that's great. We do some testing. We make sure that things work right, that they're doing what we need. Usually we talk, or at least I've talked pretty closely to the developers of whatever third-party solution we're discussing and can really find out if it's going to be a good fit or not. But if it turns out that there's no third-party solution, then QuickBooks Desktop might be the next best thing. QuickBooks Desktop or QuickBooks Enterprise are really powerful tools, and they continue to get a little bit better every year. Not quite at the pace of QBO, but things are getting quicker, better quicker, I would say. But to give an example of when a QBO and third-party app solution wasn't the right answer is we had a client that had some really advanced invoicing needs. They needed to be able to do several different types of statements and invoices, and each of those invoices needed very special wording and formatting. So with QBO, your invoicing that you can do is fairly minimal. It has some customization. You can do some custom forms on it, but it's really pretty basic at this point. And Intuit is aware that it is, I would say, a shortfall of QBO. They know, hopefully they'll work on it. And for this client, there wasn't really a third-party solution that fit the need. There are special invoicing solutions out there, inventory solutions, but it just didn't have what we need. So we stuck with using QuickBooks Desktop for them, and we're still just doing the transfers back and forth. Having said that, every year, as part of just the file review, I am spending time reviewing QBO to see if there has been any solution update to that need specifically, possibly maybe in a different version of QBO, because there are several versions. There's, Simple Start, Essentials Plus, and Advanced. So it's very possible that that feature that I need may have become available in one of the solutions out there. So once we see that we can do the advanced invoicing that we need, I know that we're going to look at switching because we could really use that level of collaboration that QBO allows us, and that we're kind of stunted a little bit by QuickBooks Desktop. I wanted to ask Alana if there was any examples of when Desktop was a better fit for our clients.
We did have one situation about a year ago with a client. They are located in a pretty remote area here in the Valley, and internet just isn't super strong out there. We went out, they were going to be perfect to do some Receipt Bank and some QuickBooks Online and do some QuickBooks Online payments. Everyone was really excited about it. When we went out there and tested things, the internet connection was just so rough. It really was kind of like taking 3 steps back and actually creating more work, waiting for things to load. It was pretty tough. So definitely, if there isn't a strong internet connection, that can really hinder the process. Right now, they're going to stay on QuickBooks Desktop, but as soon as there's a good internet line out there, they're ready to jump on. So that's tough when it's outside of your control, but it definitely happens, especially in remote areas of Montana where some of our clients are.
Yeah, definitely. Unfortunately, not everyone in the US has that high-speed internet connection, and it's out of our control really on what we can do about that. Brenda, did you have any others you wanted to share before moving on?
I don't. I think you both hit the big ones. Yeah.
Great.
All right, so let's talk a little bit more about using QuickBooks more than just a check register. I think it's no surprise that most often QuickBooks is underutilized. There are a lot of features that it can sometimes be overwhelming to really dig in and find out everything that it can do. And maybe you don't need that. Maybe you don't need to track inventory. Maybe you don't need invoicing. So you really need to find a good balance. Let's find a balance between what can make my business more efficient and give me the information that I need, and what maybe I don't need to dig into. So one of the biggest things that I tell my clients when they start using even the desktop version of QuickBooks, but more so on the online version, is to get out there and learn a little bit about the software. One of my favorite places to direct them is to the Intuit website. They've got a lot of just little short videos, tutorials that are very targeted. They're targeted towards either a module or a task. So say you're new to QuickBooks Online, you've never used the bank feeds before, and you want to dive in. You can go out to Intuit, watch their little 5-minute video on bank feeds, and it gives you a really good overview of what you're going to be looking at. But I also let them know, don't be afraid to reach out for help. The Intuit videos are just a good overview, but they're not really going to talk about your data. They're not going to talk about your processes. So it's always good to reach out to your accountant, ask them those questions, ask them to come in and spend an hour with you, just going through your process and how you're working with it in QuickBooks Online. And I promise you that hour training with your accountant is going to save you hours of struggling. And plus, we enjoy it. I know everybody here, it's like that's the favorite thing that we love doing is going on site, helping the client. It just makes us feel good leaving there knowing that your life is going to be easier. Alana, I did want to ask you, so we often advise our clients on how to use the software more efficiently to get the information that they need. What are some of the areas that you see that are most often overlooked, or do you have tips on using QuickBooks?
I definitely think before a client sets out to convert to QBO, one of the best first steps they can take is to evaluate what information they're thinking that they need and matching that to the capabilities of the software. There's quite a few examples where I see QBO being put in place, which is fantastic. And then a lot of the processes that were being used with QuickBooks Desktop are still continuing in the process with QBO. And in many situations, QBO can actually automate some of the processes that they're doing. So when we do make that conversion to QBO, it's a really good time to step back, look at your current process, and see if QBO can help automate that a little bit more or make it a little bit more efficient. When you are evaluating what information you're hoping to get, it's a good time to think about, do you want to add accounts to your chart of accounts? Do we want to streamline the chart of accounts a little bit more? Maybe you want to add some classes for your different departments to do some additional tracking. That's a really good time to kind of streamline and figure out exactly the information that you're looking for or hoping to look for. One big thing that I think is overlooked when you're switching to QBO is looking at the integrations of all of your systems and seeing how it's flowing into QBO. With QBO, we can use a lot of different applications. We talked about last week about Receipt Bank, and we'll visit some more further on in the episodes. So when you are using those integrations, looking at how they're all talking to each other, looking at how they're playing with each other, that's definitely something I think we all like to do as well, making sure everything's outlined all together. A lot of times you kind of get to the end of the year and it's like, holy cow, I have stuff flowing all over the place and it's just not giving you good information. So it's great to take a step back and make sure everything's playing well together and flowing correctly how you need it to get that usable information.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I always like visiting with a client and asking them, what is your process at the end of the month? What reports are you pulling? Are you pulling anything into Excel to manipulate it, to give you information that the system isn't giving you, or you just don't know that it can give you? And then looking at that together to see what we can do to streamline that. And then mentioning the integration and checking up on that is excellent. I can definitely attest to many times where people integrated something, didn't really test it out, and then you're fixing multiple months of information. So it's really good to get ahead of that. Next, we're going to be talking a little bit about the end result and what can be done on the tax side.
So now we get to hear a little bit from Tracy. As I said at the beginning, she's a tax manager at JCCS and has tons of experience talking to clients about why having just a general ledger system in general is needed as opposed to using an Excel file or a shoebox. So here we're taking a little bit of a step back saying, hey, you just need a general ledger system, whatever it is, you need it. And then kind of going forward of what a tax preparer usually looks at from a general ledger system. So Tracy, tell us, what are the benefits of using a general ledger system?
Well, I think that the biggest benefit of all is really that you have the information that you need when you need it at your fingertips. As long as you're using your system correctly and getting everything into the right bucket in a timely manner, at the push of a button, you can see where you're at. And this helps your CPA because when you're doing some planning, they can pull a report and say, okay, here's where you're at with this, and can do some forecasting and kind of get you where you need to be on the tax side before the end of the year and before you find out that you're doing so well, you're gonna owe a little bit more money. So you want to make sure that that you have that information so you can see where you're at, so that you can do that sort of planning. Also, just the reporting of it is really, really good. The comparisons that you can do, because you can look to prior periods and compare, see if there's anything out of whack. And also, I know that the QuickBooks Online integrates with some other forecasting softwares that help you do a little bit more business analysis, which can be really useful. But none of that really works unless you're using a general ledger system and and that you're actually entering the information timely. So.
Right. I'm glad you mentioned about that integrating with other forecasting systems. The one that we use is Fathom, and we'll discuss this later in, I think, episode 6. But having that ability to not only pull reports for the tax prep, but that planning and looking forward, I think is something that we're doing a lot more now because we've built the efficiencies and automation that we can actually look at what the numbers are telling us and plan for the future much better. So when you're gathering your information to do the planning or the tax prep, what specific things are you looking at for that a client could look at beforehand to see if their books are even ready for your planning or your tax prep?
Sure, yeah. Well, we usually start with pulling a balance sheet. This is the report that shows us your assets, your liabilities, your equity, and your income for the year, the first thing we really want to do, and what we're looking at, is make sure that the starting point of your balance sheet matches the last year's ending point. Because when we're doing taxes, we need to start in the same place. And some of the reasons why this goes off, oftentimes your accountant might give you some journal entries to make at the end of the year into your accounting system, and either they don't get made, or maybe the version gets lost, or something happens. So that's the important thing for us to start as tax preparers, is just making sure that we're starting in the same place, and we'll look at that and figure out what the difference is and make corrections if we need to. The other thing we take a look at with that is, what changed from this year to last year. Once we're at the same spot, did you buy more equipment? Did you get another loan? I mean, these are all important things for preparing the tax return. It gives us an idea of what other questions we need to ask, what information we might need in addition to what we had last year. And so once we get through that and get that squared away, then we'll look at the income statement and also compare that to last year. We're looking for big differences. There might be big differences because, maybe you took on another expense that you didn't have last year. Maybe you decided to start advertising, and that's okay. But sometimes the differences might mean that something's in the wrong place. I know I've had clients put loan payments in an expense account where they really should be going against the balance sheet account, reducing the liability. So we want to make sure we find those things and move them into the right bucket before we prepare the tax return. So that's why making sure you have the right categories and getting everything into the right place and doing it timely really makes a difference. And of course, your accountant is probably always willing to help you if you're not sure, you have a question about where something should go. They'll be happy to help you and tell you where it should go.
Definitely. There's a couple clients that I work with that they're in QBO right now, and they'll have, a month's worth of transactions that they aren't quite sure where to go. And so they'll throw them into the Ask My Accountant. And then because we can go over that Ask My Accountant and explain it to them, where we want to move these things and why. And we can be looking at the same exact thing. She's in QBO, I'm in QBO. We're just comparing our thoughts and talking through it. And so we're able to get all of those resolved month by month, rather than giving you a set of books at year end that has a huge number in the Ask My Accountant category. I think answering those questions as timely as possible is really important in making sure that our data is good for the tax preparer.
Right.
So I do have a question for Alana again. I want to bring her in because she also does taxes as well. And I wanted to just get your opinion on using one system over another. So we've talked about QBO, talked about QuickBooks Desktop. I know I personally like using QBO because the client can say, hey, I'm ready for tax prep. I can hop in, no backups, no sharing passwords. I can also enter in the adjusting journal entries right away. I don't have to give them the piece of paper to then enter and hope that that piece of paper doesn't get lost or just misplaced. So I really like that it's a much more seamless delivery system. Alana, what are your thoughts on that?
I agree with all of the pros of QBO. I love that we can help throughout the year instead of at year end when we're doing the tax return, also trying to figure out what we did with the accounting, how can we help them all within, a short period of time of getting that tax return out. I've also seen a lot of pros for QBO during the last couple of months when a lot of things have been anything but normal. I mentioned earlier, with people working from home, working different schedules, the QBO is very nice for people to be able to jump in, continue with the accounting process, or if you've even had some turnover, having someone like JCCS or an external accountant to be able to jump into the QBO file and keep it rolling is really nice. And especially the real-time data in QBO. I think the last couple of months, us and many clients have realized having up-to-date real-time financials can be very beneficial when you kind of least expect it. A lot of the CARES Act items and things that have happened with COVID, you've needed up-to-date financials, you've needed even historical financial information. So keeping that financial data up to date and using the capabilities of QBO to do that is definitely beneficial when maybe you don't even think that you'll need it. So a lot of pros for QBO that we've seen the last couple of months.
Definitely agree with that. Knowing your financials up to the date has been really important, especially for the different credits that you can get, both Montana and Fed. So Tracy, anything else to tack on for our tax perspective?
I think just my last piece of advice is just if you don't have a general ledger accounting system, and if you're not interested in QBO, there are other options, of course, and there are some that are a little bit simpler depending on what you have going on. But you can you can get into the general ledger system, and it will help you. It will help you in your own business and just determining, you know, where you're at and all that stuff. It's good information. It's good data to have. And I've seen so many people who really needed that data, and it goes a long way. So that's really my only piece of advice is if you don't have one, you really do need one.
Awesome. Thanks, Tracy. Brenda, you want to do our next slide and then we'll head into questions?
Yes. So coming up, just a reminder that we've got 3 more episodes in our series. Episode number 4 is going to be all about payroll. Pretty excited about that. And episode 5 is all about the applications. There's so many out there. So we're going to kind of look at which ones we prefer to use and how you can vet that out. And then episode 6, we're going to wrap everything up. We're going to bring Tony and Drew back and talk a little bit about what does all this mean and how do we move forward. So I think this is a great time to tackle some of the questions in the Q&A. So one of the first questions was, do you have clients utilizing multi-user mode for QuickBooks Desktop? And I know we do in our office. I don't know if there's a question associated with that, if it works well. We have seen that it does have its pros and cons. It seems to work great, allowing multiple people in the file at once, being able to enter transactions, pull reports. There are a couple cons. There are a couple things that you could only do in single user mode, or only one person can be in at a time. Is it limiting? Overall, probably not. I don't know if anybody else has some thoughts on that.
I'll add a thought. I think the one con that we've experienced is more around how it's set up, like how each user accesses the file. So where is the file saved, and each installation of QBO or QuickBooks Desktop, making sure that they're all on the latest update. So I think there's a little bit more IT involved in the setup of the multi-user, just the file itself. But we do have clients using it and they're successful. Those are usually ones that have a specific need that QuickBooks Desktop can solve for that QBO can't yet. Having said that, there is another question down below about how QBO handles multiple people accessing a file if bookkeepers have different duties and aren't able to access everything they need. QBO is actually getting much stronger in this area than they used to be. It used to be you had very limited customization of users, and they're building that up, especially in their QBO Advanced product. They have much more defined permissions. One great thing about QBO is you can add report-only users where they can only go in and view reports that are available, like profit and loss balance sheet. They can't actually modify anything. And this is really great for nonprofits who have board members that want to get in and look at stuff, but they don't necessarily want the ability to change anything, especially if your board is rotating. You don't necessarily want anyone able to get their fingers in and change any of the records. So QBO is definitely getting better. Is it at the same level of desktop? Not yet. Desktop and especially enterprise, they have some really very strong customization options. QBO is getting there, not quite there yet, but I personally have not experienced any issues with the multiple people accessing the QBO file, unless you're using the payroll option, which only one person can be in there changing payroll at a time, which is actually the same in desktop. So I think we've got those two questions answered. Unless Brenda, Tracy, did either of you want to add anything onto that? Perfect. We did have a cybersecurity question. I'm going to try my best to answer. So it says that cyberbank robberies contribute to 1 trillion in cybercrime losses. Yes, there are a lot of attempts at cybercrime at the financial institution level, at the credit agency level. Cybercrime is huge. And that's why it's important to have a strong system in place to prevent it, or at least to identify it. I don't know the number of cybercrime attacks that Intuit gets every day, but I'm assuming that it is a huge number, because they also have TurboTax, which is all Social Security numbers and all of that financial information as well. So they really do have to make sure that their security levels are high. I personally don't necessarily have a problem with using cloud-based solutions. I know that there are people out there that have a strong reaction to that, I guess I would say. And it's a tough question to answer, but I would say with the number of attacks that they're going to be getting on a daily basis, not just based around QuickBooks, but also their other products. I mean, we have Mint, and then they just acquired Credit Karma. So you're pulling a credit agency information. I'm feeling fairly secure in knowing their security protocols with their, believe it's their SWOT analysis and their testing. I feel pretty confident in it. I will also say we were actually just discussing security in the deep web, and when two of the 3 credit agencies were hacked earlier, I can't remember if it was last year or a couple of years ago, but the data that was hacked and then distributed on the deep web, only 10% of that data was new. So all of the rest of that data was already out there. So I know it's been said that everyone's information's out there already. It's just a matter of whether people are using it or not. But that's my 2 cents on the security question. I think the risk is there, but I also do have a pretty high opinion of Intuit's security just based on their other products as well. Anyone else have any thoughts on that? I know Brenda did not want to answer it.
No, I'm glad that you brought up the other products that they manage, because they have a lot of sensitive information out there. So
let's hop on to the next question about QBO receipt tracking, and does it work similarly to something like Orderly, where you can track inventory and food costing? Hope you don't mind, but I'm going to keep talking just a little bit longer. I would say right now, the QBO receipt tracking is not at that level. It is, like I said, still in beta form. They're still working on it pretty hard because it's not quite up to snuff. And that's, I would say, both a good thing and a bad thing. It's nice that you can see Intuit release products as they continue to work on them. So you can see where they're wanting to go. Do I think that they're going to be a great solution for tracking inventory and food costing specifically for restaurants? I would say it could probably do it if your restaurant is very, very small, or you had minimal inventory, but really there's some great third-party applications out there specific for tracking your food costs. Toast is one. Square actually does a great one if you're doing quick service. If you're doing more of the sit-down restaurant or a fine dining, you'd want to look more at the probably Toast. I know there's a couple other ones. Upserve is a really great one. So I would say you don't necessarily want your general ledger system to be great at everything. You want it to be great in accounting. That's what it's for. And then find the solution that's going to work best for what you need. Inventory and food costing is pretty complicated. So find the solution that's going to fit and make sure it integrates over. So hopefully I answered that one well enough. Brenda, you want to take the next one, or maybe Alana?
If I can get myself off mute. Or Alana, did you want to jump in?
No, go for it. Go for it.
Okay. So a company that I do books for using QuickBooks Online, and 4 months of transactions are missing from the bank sync. Is there another option to try to get this information downloaded versus upload of the Excel spreadsheet form of statements from the bank? And I personally don't know the answer to this. My go-to usually would be the Excel spreadsheet to upload it, but I'm guessing that Erin or Alana might have an alternate answer.
Go for it, Alana.
Oh, okay. I definitely use the Excel spreadsheet. You can go back into the link with the bank, and actually, like if you're missing from January, you can go back into where you connected the bank account and re-download like a period of time. The only thing with that, as opposed to the Excel, is it takes everything from, if you've chosen to download everything from like January 1st, it's going to take everything through current. So you would have to exclude quite a few months just to get those 4 months that you need. But that is a workaround if you don't want to just download the Excel file. You can just re-download everything from your connection.
Yep.
Great.
I think part of that too also depends on the financial institution. Some financial institutions only save 90 days. Some go back further. Some websites, financial institution websites will have where you can actually download the QuickBooks file that you can upload the transactions. So part of that depends on the financial institution as well. But if you are having issues with getting transactions or anything, definitely reach out to someone at the firm, and we can give you our experience depending on the financial institution you're working with.
Great. So the next one here is there any way to access QuickBooks Online offline if the internet is down or the occasional poor connection? QuickBooks Online does have a desktop application that you can download, and I've had limited use with it, but I know we've got one client that's been using it for that instance where there's poor connection, so they'll use the application on their desktop when they're in the office. Erin or Alana, have you guys used the application much?
I have. It accesses QBO the same way that a web browser does. So if you're not connected to the internet, you're going to have the same issue.
Okay.
I would say that is why we recommend evaluating your internet connection to make sure that it is a strong internet connection available most of the time. Inevitably, internet's going to go down. We might have a big weather storm that knocks out fiber cable or something, and during those times, I find something else to do. It is one of the things that you pay for having a cloud system. It is 24/7 access. But there could be an event that causes the internet to go down. Every once in a while, QBO will be running maintenance, and it usually doesn't take long, but there are times when you can't get in. So I would say that it is a risk, just like your server could go down if you're running a server-based copy of QuickBooks, or your install could crash. I think you're going to have some level of disconnect kind of with any solution, but it is something to be aware of before you move. Is if internet goes down for a day, you're probably not going to do any accounting for the day. So something to be aware of. There are solutions that can do a backup of your QuickBooks. One comes packed in with QBO Advanced. So if that's a really big concern of yours, and that's the one thing that's holding you back, say, talk to your person at JCCS, and we can kind of evaluate what the real risk is there.
And it does bring up a good point that at times QuickBooks Online does go down. There is a website out there that you can check for outages. So if you're having a difficult time getting in, you're not sure you can get into other websites, go out there, see if it's just an outage that they're having in your area.
So I know we had originally planned this to be about 30 minutes of content and 15 minutes of Q&A, but we've obviously gone over that a little bit. I'd really like to answer the last couple of questions, see if we can get those in the last 5 minutes before 11. So those of you who are able to stay, thank you. Sorry, we're going a little over. I did want to point out, a person posted that they liked QBO's two-factor authentication. So FYI, if you aren't aware, QBO does have a two-factor authentication process where it'll text you or email you or call you a code. So that is one more level of security. And then we had a tool recommended for uploading receipts faster into QuickBooks. We use Receipt Bank. They just put a ton of money into their OCR function, and it is so fast now. You can actually watch it move from the processing area into your inbox. And from when we first started using it, it is so fast. Alana, would you agree?
Oh yeah, it's been fantastic. Yeah, it's very fast.
So fast. And I keep comparing it to when we first used to use it. And we're like, put it in, wait a day, go back. And now it's, 30 seconds and it's over. So definitely that's the one that we prefer. There are others out there, but with our relationship with Receipt Bank, we're just really happy with their speed. We have 2 questions left. One was in the chat, and it was about QBO or desktop and export and import of invoices. Is there a way to submit invoices via an exported file rather than a printout? This is a pretty specific question. So I would say if you have someone at JCCS that you talk to regularly, give them a call. They can, or email any one of us on this webinar, and we're happy to talk to you. There are some solutions out there that do importing and exporting of invoices. QuickBooks Advanced, or QuickBooks Online Advanced does some, but then there are some third-party solutions as well. So it depends on what level you need. So for that question, I would say talk to whoever your person at JCCS is, or one of us on the webinar. Brenda, you want to take the last one?
Sure. So with the auto reconciliation, is there a limitation for finding mistakes? So that's a good question. You will sometimes, and hopefully I'm answering the right question here, but you will sometimes find that when you go in to reconcile the bank account, even using that bank feed, you may run into some issues. QuickBooks Online does have a great feature when you're in the bank reconciliation that it will help walk you through finding those issues. It will bring up possible solutions, maybe a reconciled check from a prior period had been voided or deleted. And so it will pop up and show you, this is the check that was in there. It was voided, and it'll allow you to put it back in. I personally have ran into also sometimes the timing of the reconciliation is an issue. So if I'm reconciling a bank statement for 9/28, if I don't put in 9/28 and I put in 9/30, it will want to auto reconcile to that 9/30 date. And And sometimes I run into it more so on the credit cards. Credit cards transactions will sometimes actually clear the account on a different date than it will show it in the system. And so they do have a column that is called the cleared date. And I find if I sort by that cleared date, a lot of times I can find those issues pop right out. Anybody else want to add to that?
I would just, oh, go ahead, Alana.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say the auto reconciliation also doesn't reconcile it and like sweep any difference to the reconciling discrepancy account. It will auto reconcile, but it gives you the chance to either finalize if you're at a balanced reconciliation or to find maybe a voided check or a deleted transaction and then finalize the reconciliation. So you're not having to auto reconcile and then try and go back to a sweep account and try to find a difference. You have the ability to still control your reconciliation after QuickBooks has done all that it can to try and help you.
And I think I would just add to kind of bring it full circle is it's the philosophy behind QBO versus QuickBooks Desktop. The QBO is much more about the review of the transactions at the bank feed level, and that should be where you're finding your mistakes or your errors. Whereas Desktop is more a data entry one that you then kind of review in the reconciliation. So I think the auto reconciliation can be a little scary, but if you're thinking about how you're reviewing your information in QBO and how the workflow goes through in QBO as compared to Desktop, you're catching your mistakes at the entry side, the review side before reconciling, whereas it's kind of different on the Desktop side. So I think that's it for questions. I think, as Brenda has up here, we have our upcoming episodes. Any final thoughts to share?
I have two final thoughts. One, if that counts. One, definitely get comfortable with your general ledger system. It's your general ledger system, so whatever you choose to use, whether it's QuickBooks Online, QuickBooks Desktop, or something else, definitely get comfortable with it and see what all it can provide for you. Some of them can be very efficient and help cut your manual processes. So get comfortable with it. And then two, I think when you're switching to QBO, moving from QuickBooks Desktop to QBO usually entails getting comfortable with different applications out there, where QuickBooks Desktop usually have payroll built in. It's all pretty much within QuickBooks. Going to QBO, get comfortable with the apps that are out there. There's some very strong apps that'll help make your process that much more efficient. It'll make your day that much better. So get comfortable with the applications that you can use.
Tracy, anything to final thought?
I would just add on to what Alana said, but reach out if you need help. If you're not sure about something, reach out to your accountant or another expert with your general ledger software, whatever it may be, because it's way better to fix those errors or get it in the right place up front as opposed to 9 months later. So yeah, don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help.
Awesome, thank you. Brenda, final thought?
Mine would be to, if your current system is not allowing you to forecast and predict the future, try to look forward. If you're always just looking back, then it's probably time to look at a better solution.
Awesome, that is great. I think that's what we're building up to by our last episode, is the importance of looking forward rather than just looking behind. We want to look to the future and what it's bringing and what we can do. My final thought is, if you aren't sure, or if you just have some general questions on if converting is a good switch, or maybe is staying with QuickBooks Desktop the best thing for you right now, talk to whoever you work with at JCCS. We're in the middle of building a decision tree to help us make those decisions. So we're constantly thinking about is this the right move? Are there still things that need to be worked on? We're happy to discuss it. Sometimes just getting those thoughts out in the air helps. So we are always here to help. Reach out to any of us on this call or whoever you work with. We like doing this kind of work, so we're always happy to help and get you going forward so that you can look forward into the future and make some really great decisions. And I think that's it. We are 4 minutes more than I said we were going to be, but thank you all for attending. We will, like I said, get the episode up hopefully next week along with the slides. And if you have any questions, connect with us. We are happy to help.